I can tell you right now, with clarity, that the mainstream financial press and most defense commentary are completely failing to convey. Is this? The United States military does not currently have the capacity to win the battle it is now committed to fighting. Let me be precise about what I mean. What Washington is calling a blockade is, in operational reality, a high-risk intercept operation being conducted inside one of the most asymmetrically lethal maritime environments on the planet. The U.S. Navy, under Admiral Brad Cooper, at CENTCOM, activated the blockade of Iranian ports at 10 a.m. Eastern on April 13, 2026. In the first 24 hours, CENTCOM reported over 10,000 personnel, more than a dozen warships, and dozens of aircraft committed to enforcement. They stopped 6 ships. They redirected them. And by the following week, according to Lloyd's List, at least 26 vessels had successfully bypassed the blockade line in both directions. That is not a blockade. That is a cordon with holes in it. Here is what the mainstream coverage is completely missing. The intelligence community, according to sources cited by CNN, has confirmed that the Trump administration fundamentally underestimated Iran's willingness to close the strait before the first sortie of Operation Epic. Fury was even wheels up on February 28th. The planning failure was not tactical, it was strategic, and it has produced a condition that no amount of carrier strike group repositioning can now correct without catastrophic escalation risk. Iran, for its part, did not respond to the blockade with its navy in the conventional sense. It responded the way it has trained to respond for 30 years, with IRGC fast attack craft. With sea mines already laid across the main shipping channel south of Larak Island, with mobile anti-ship cruise missile batteries pre-positioned in terrain so acoustically and visually cluttered that even the best ISR platforms in the American arsenal struggle to achieve targeting solutions. One Congressional Research Service analyst described it plainly. Dispersed mobile launchers are highly survivable from air attack due to ground clutter. The situation as it stands today, April 28, 2026, is a dual blockade. Iran has locked the Gulf. The United States has locked Iran's ports. Neither side has the leverage to force the other to move without accepting a cost that their domestic political architecture cannot absorb. One analyst with direct knowledge of the military planning told CNN bluntly, "It will come down to how badly is Trump willing to accept the risk and start pushing ships through." That is the question I am going to answer for you today. And the answer is not what Washington wants you to believe. The Strait of Hormuz is not a body of water that rewards conventional naval doctrine. It is a geographic kill box, and it was engineered by geology and history to favor the defender, not the projector of power. At its narrowest point, the strait measures 21 nautical miles across. That figure, cited routinely in geopolitical summaries, is almost meaningless without its operational context. The navigable deep-water channel through which laden supertankers and very large crude carriers can actually transit safely without grounding on the shallow shoals of the Omani coastline to the south compresses to 2 inbound and 2 outbound lanes, each approximately 2 nautical miles wide, separated by a 2-mile median zone. The effective envelope of maneuverable water from the perspective of a 300,000 deadweight-ton crude carrier attempting transit is barely wider than a highway interchange. There is no sea room, there is no margin for evasive action, if a threat vector is acquired. A vessel that takes a hit inside the strait's primary channel does not sink cleanly. It becomes an obstacle, a burning listing, smoke-generating obstacle that shuts the lane for every vessel behind it. Now place that physical constraint against the Iranian northern coastline, and the calculus becomes stark. Bandar Abbas, the IRGC Navy's primary Gulf command hub, sits directly at the strait's northern shoulder, approximately 25 kilometers from the main shipping channel. The Keshem Island complex, the largest island in the Persian Gulf, lies between Bandar Abbas and the strait itself, providing layered terrain concealment for fast attack craft, unmanned surface vessels, and mobile missile systems. Abu Musa, Greater Tumb, and Lesser Tumb, 3 strategically contested islands in the Central Gulf, were confirmed by a March 2025 IRGC announcement to host deployed missile systems. These positions form an overlapping fire arc that covers the entire northern approach to the strait's navigable lanes. The physics of this geography are unforgiving. Anti-ship cruise missiles, including variants of the Iranian-developed Nur and Qadir systems. Coastal adaptations of the Chinese CAT-02 architecture have operational ranges extending well beyond 120 kilometers. The targets they would engage: supertankers and naval escorts moving at 12 to 16 knots through a constrained 2-mile lane, are not maneuverable assets. They are, in the language of targeting doctrine, high-value, low survivability platforms in a fixed geometry threat environment. Terminal defense against a saturation attack in this environment places an extraordinary burden on shipboard systems, like the Phalanx CIWS and the SM-2 and SM-6 interceptors carried by Burke-class destroyers. Those systems are effective. They are not infinite. Magazine depth is a hard constraint, and in a coordinated saturation attack scenario, multiple inbound vectors. Simultaneously, the math favors the attacker. The mine threat compounds this calculus in ways that are not receiving adequate analytical attention in the Western press. According to the Foreign Policy Research Institute, clearing a coup route through a mine strait, even in a permissive environment with the enemy's minefield charts in hand, takes a minimum of 2 weeks and requires a specialized force that the United States has spent 2 decades systematically decommissioning. In 1991, it took over 40 minesweepers 4 months to clear Iraqi minefields in the Gulf. CENTCOM today has a fraction of that mine countermeasures capacity in theater. Influence mines, bottom line, acoustically or magnetically triggered, supplied potentially by Russian or Chinese partners, are the hardest category to detect and neutralize. They require no operator, they require no command signal. This is the terrain into which the United States Navy has inserted its blockade force. Not an open ocean, not a permissive blue water environment where American technological superiority is decisive. A 21-mile choke point with mined lanes, layered coastal missile batteries, swarm-capable fast attack craft operating from island redoubts, and an adversary whose entire naval doctrine for 3 decades has been optimized for exactly this engagement geometry. Western military doctrine built around carrier-centric power projection across open sea lanes was not designed for this fight. The Strait of Hormuz was to understand why the current U.S. blockade posture is operationally unsustainable. It is necessary to examine precisely how Iran has constructed its Hormuz denial architecture layer by layer, and why the asymmetric cost differential between that architecture and the American force required to defeat it represents a strategic trap rather than a winnable military problem. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' Navy, the IRGCN, does not fight like a conventional naval force. It was never designed to following the lessons drawn from the 1980s tanker war, in which the United States neutralized Iranian conventional naval assets with relative ease during Operation Praying Mantis in April 1988. The IRGC systematically rebuilt its maritime warfare doctrine around mass, dispersion, and speed rather than platform capability. The result is a fleet numbering in the hundreds of fast inshore attack craft. FIA sees in joint doctrine terminology operating from hardened coastal shelters, island complexes, and shallow water berths that are acoustically and visually difficult to target from altitude. These vessels, Iranian-built Bladderun-derived speedboats, Pakab-class missile attack craft, and Siraj fast attack boats, are individually cheap, individually replaceable, and individually lethal. Close engagement ranges, armed with rocket-propelled grenades, recoilless rifles, attachable limpet mines, and in more advanced configurations, short-range anti-ship missiles. A single fast attack craft is a manageable threat to a Burke-class destroyer. A coordinated swarm of 30 to 50 such craft, converging simultaneously from multiple bearing angles on a single high-value target, presents a fundamentally different targeting problem. The CIWS Phalanx system, the last-ditch rotary cannon defense, on American surface combatants, has a cyclic rate of approximately 4,500 rounds per minute and a lateral tracking speed that is finite. In a properly sequenced swarm attack with decoy runs, simultaneous multi-axis approach vectors, and electronic emission designed to saturate shipboard sensor suites, the probability of at least partial penetration is not theoretical. It is a documented operational concern that CENTCOM planners have wargamed repeatedly, and the outcomes are not consistently favorable to the defender. Trump's April 23 order authorizing U.S. Navy forces to shoot and kill Iranian boats observed. Laying mines in the strait escalates this dynamic rather than resolves it. It places American surface combatants in a posture of active engagement inside a threat environment, close to an Iranian-controlled coastline, within range of land-based fire, where the cost of every kinetic response is borne by the most expensive assets in the American inventory. Above the swarm layer sits Iran's distributed, land-based anti-ship cruise missile architecture. And this is where the operational picture becomes genuinely dangerous for American surface assets. The Noor missile, Iran's domestically produced derivative of the Chinese CAT-102, is a sea-skimming, active radar-homing anti-ship cruise missile with a range of approximately 120 to 170 kilometers and a 165-kilogram warhead. Its successor variant, the Qadr, extends that range further. Both systems are deployed on mobile transporter rector launcher platforms, truck-mounted, roadmobile, capable of rapid displacement between firing positions. This mobility is the critical variable that defeats American targeting doctrine. A mobile missile battery that fires and displaces within minutes does not present a persistent electromagnetic or thermal signature. It does not sit in a fixed installation that can be pre-targeted and struck at the opening of a kinetic operation. It hides in the terrain, in the wadis and ridgelines of the Hormuzgan coastal range, in the industrial port infrastructure of Bandar Abbas, under the visual clutter of Qeshm Island's irregular coastline, and it re-emerges only at the moment of engagement. According to the Foreign Policy Research Institute's direct assessment, even with unmatched American ISR capability, these dispersed mobile launchers are highly survivable from air attack due to ground clutter. That assessment was not made casually. It reflects the accumulated analytical judgment of former CENTCOM planners who have studied this specific target set for years. The confirmed IRGC deployment of missile systems on Abu Musa, Greater Tumb, and Lesser Tumb, the three contested Gulf islands positioned in the central approach to the strait, creates overlapping fire arcs that a carrier strike group commander must treat as a contested zone for any surface asset transiting within 150 kilometers of the northern coastline. The USS Abraham Lincoln, confirmed by CENTCOM to be conducting blockade operations in the Arabian Sea as of April 16th, is operating at a significant standoff distance from the strait's northern approaches precisely because of this threat geometry. That standoff distance protects the carrier. It also limits its ability to conduct sustained close-in operations inside the Gulf itself. The third and most underreported layer of Iran's Hormuz denial strategy is its mine warfare capability. And it is here that the cost asymmetry between Iranian offense and American defense reaches its most extreme expression. A naval mine costs between $10,000 and $50,000, depending on type and sophistication. A bottom influence mine, acoustically or magnetically triggered, anchored to the seabed, is effectively invisible to surface radar and extremely difficult to neutralize from the air. Iran has confirmed mining activity inside the strait's primary shipping channel. Trump's order to destroy Iranian mining boats addresses the delivery mechanism. It does not address the mines already in the water. Clearing those mines requires dedicated mine countermeasures vessels, MCMVs, operating at low speed, with hull-mounted sonar in the exact waters where IRGC, fast attack, craft, and coastal missile batteries are most effective. The mine-clearing vessels must be protected. Protection requires surface combatants. Surface combatants operating close to the Iranian coastline at low speed. The speed required to support MCM operations are at maximum vulnerability to the layered threat environment described above. According to FPRI analysts, clearing a single route through a mine strait takes a minimum of 2 weeks under permissive conditions. Current conditions in the Strait of Hormuz are the precise opposite of permissive. By April 28th, the United States had intercepted 38 vessels total. Dozens more had bypassed the blockade line. The mines remain. The mobile missile batteries remain. The IRGC fast attack craft, dispersed and sheltered, remain. The American blockade is holding the perimeter. It is not controlling the strait. Those are categorically different military conditions. And the difference between them is precisely what Iran's layered asymmetric architecture was designed to create and sustain indefinitely. The military stalemate inside the Strait of Hormuz is not a regional problem. It is a global economic event, and its full macroeconomic consequences have not yet been priced into the systems that govern how capital moves, how energy is allocated, and how the post-1945 architecture of American enforced maritime order holds together under sustained operational failure. Before February 28, 2026, the Strait of Hormuz was the transit point for approximately 35% of the world's seaborne oil trade and 20% of global liquefied natural gas supply. Those figures represent not a margin of the global energy system, they represent its structural backbone. Saudi Arabia's eastern terminals, Kuwait, the UAE, Qatar's vast LNG export infrastructure at Ras Laffan, all of it moves through 21 nautical miles of water that is now, for practical operational purposes, closed to commercial traffic at pre-war volumes. The price response was immediate and historically unprecedented. Brent crude surpassed $100 per barrel on March 8th, the first time in 4 years, and reached a peak of $126 per barrel, representing the largest single monthly increase in oil prices ever recorded in modern energy market history. That price spike is not simply a commodity statistic. It is a tax applied simultaneously without legislative authorization to every economy on the planet that consumes petroleum-derived products, which is every economy on the planet. For the United States, where Congress has approved over $1 trillion in defense spending for 2026, and the active war against Iran is consuming approximately $1 billion per day in operational costs. The energy price shock arrives as a simultaneous fiscal and inflationary event. Defense expenditure of that magnitude, layered on top of an energy-driven inflationary impulse, produces the precise macroeconomic conditions that central bank tightening cycles struggle most to address. Cost-push inflation driven by supply constraint rather than demand excess. The Federal Reserve has no instrument that opens the Strait of Hormuz, parallel to the oil price shock. The global maritime insurance market has undergone a structural dislocation that will persist long after any negotiated resolution of the current standoff. Lloyd's of London wore risk premiums for vessels transiting the Persian Gulf and Arabian Sea approaches have increased by multiples, not percentages, since February 28. Multiple major shipping operators, including several of the world's largest container and tanker lines, have suspended Persian Gulf operations entirely, redirecting vessels around the Cape of Good Hope at a cost premium in time and fuel that adds approximately 10 to 14 days of transit to every voyage that previously cleared Hormuz in hours. That rerouting premium compounds directly into global supply chain costs. Longer voyages mean higher charter rates, higher fuel consumption, delayed port arrivals, and cascading schedule disruptions across the container. Shipping networks that underpin just-in-time manufacturing from European automotive production to Southeast Asian electronics assembly. The inflationary signal generated by this maritime disruption has not yet fully propagated through consumer price indices. The pipeline lag between shipping cost increases and retail shelf prices typically runs 90 to 120 days. The consumer inflation that Western economies will register from this disruption in Q3 and Q4 of 2026 has not yet been felt. Beyond the immediate commodity and insurance markets, the Hormuz crisis is producing a structural fracture in the American concept of freedom of navigation that has underwritten global trade since 1945. Iran's decision to selectively permit passage, allowing Chinese, Russian, Indian, Iraqi, and Pakistani vessels, while denying transit to Western-flagged ships, is not merely a tactical pressure tool, it is a demonstration, conducted in real time and at global scale, that the post-war maritime order is neither universal nor guaranteed. It is conditional. And the condition, as Tehran has made explicit, is geopolitical alignment. China and Russia, as assessed by CSI's analysts, are exploiting this demonstration with strategic discipline. Neither has intervened militarily, neither has absorbed significant cost. Both are watching the United States spend $1 billion per day maintaining a blockade that 26 vessels bypassed within its first week, while accumulating influence with the non-Western world that is watching the same data. Iran exported 1.84 million barrels per day of crude oil in March 2026. More than before the war began, routed through Chinese and Russian-adjacent networks that the U.S. blockade has proven structurally unable to interdict at scale. The analyst, cited by Al Jazeera, was precise in his assessment. Iran's prepositioned oil revenue flows carried on hundreds of tankers already transited before the blockade activated, could sustain Tehran's financial position through August 2026. Does President Trump have until August? The analyst asked. Probably not. The blockade is costing Washington $1 billion per day. It is costing Iran leverage. It is already banked. That is not a symmetric exchange. That is an asymmetric economic war, running in parallel with an asymmetric kinetic one, and the United States is on the expensive side of both ledgers. Simultaneously, I have laid out the terrain, the hardware, the economics, and the strategic architecture of this standoff with as much clinical precision as the available data permits.